In this series, we're examining the four categories of supposed solutions, our Ersatz Saviors, let's call them, that experts argue will help our global civilization weather the twin crises of the planetary environment and of civilization's resilience in the coming century.
Our four Ersatz solutions are decreasing the number of children born through a modernization process called the demographic transition, growing the economies in poor countries, technological innovation, and a paradigmatic shift in human consciousness. Here we examine the second Ersatz Savior, growing the economy. Recognizing that population is still expanding fast and that many billions of people already live in poverty, economists find that only by growing the economy can civilization properly feed, clothe, and shelter us all. Despite differences in culture, politics, and religion among the world's institutional leaders, the one objective they can all agree upon is the imperative of economic growth. And in the so-called democracies, if a political leader presides over a time of poor economic performance, he or she will be voted out. George Bush I discovered this when he was replaced by Bill Clinton after just one relatively trouble-free term in office and a military victory in Iraq. The obvious problem with economic growth is exactly the same one we found with modernism and the demographic transition model. Namely, that economic growth impacts our planet through a growth in material consumption and services, as well as an increase in waste and pollution. In this graph, we are comparing the change in population with the change in consumption from the year 1500 to 2000. What becomes immediately obvious is that the world's wealth has increased so much more than has population. Indeed, wealth has increased so much that it morphs the scary population J-curve into a barely noticeable little uptick. The consumption monster makes population look like a sweet, gentle pet. Notice wealth took off like a rocket around 1950. This graph, starting in 1950 and ending in 2010, may make this relationship between the population explosion and the consumption explosion more obvious. Given what it has already cost the environment to feed, clothe, shelter, and otherwise provide for the few billions of us who are presently doing okay today, and what it will cost to improve the lives for the impoverished billions living today, as well as for those billions coming online this century, seems like an extraordinary challenge. Extraordinary, even if this were all we were asking of the earth in the coming century. However, we expect to demand even far more than this from the earth because most new consumption is not done by the have-nots, but rather by the already haves. Indeed, 70%, that's 70% of the world's economic growth, goes to the already wealthiest 17% of the world, those people living in the blue and lavender regions on our map. This means that to feed everyone and to provide everyone on the planet with the basics now considered to be due citizens of civilization, schools, housing, furniture, clothing, transportation, which includes cars, roads, parking lots, service stations, oil refineries, etc., as well as medical facilities, everyday items, entertainment, and so forth, the economy will have to grow many times more yet. Our global civilization has already appropriated almost 40% of all the land on the planet and 56% of the land that is actually habitable. Another way of saying this is that of all the sunlight plants photosynthesize into useful biological energy, humans have taken some 40 or more percent to themselves. More ominously, we use even more than the plants are actually producing, both those on land and in the oceans. We are using, or mining if you will, energy that plants have stored in previous years, in the wood of the plants, in the soil, and in the animals who feed on plants. According to numerous analysts, each year since about 1985, we've been using more than 100% of the renewable biosphere. That is, every year we use life-giving resources faster than the earth can replenish them. This is why forests are shrinking, fish stocks are disappearing from the oceans, and farmland is losing its fertility. Plus, of course, we're using vast amounts of fossil fuels, which is fossilized photosynthesis in the form of coal, petroleum, and natural gas. So here's the human dilemma. To address its challenges, civilization is using the very same methods and the same ways of thinking that got us into this predicament in the first place. Since it is consumption, not population itself, that impacts the earth, more economic growth is an ersatz solution. It is perhaps possible to feed, clothe, house, and otherwise maintain the health and well-being of the many billions of humans inhabiting the earth and the billions more who will be soon joining us. Perhaps. Our task is enormous. It will require unprecedented collective effort. And we will not succeed unless we drastically reduce family sizes and simultaneously reduce consumption, especially by the world's wealthiest 15% or so. These, in turn, would require unprecedented changes in individual and cultural values, perspective, and behavior, and in society's institutional structures. Since there is little to no evidence for a significant change in these, we will continue relying on ersatz solutions.